Hello, it's Reverend Chris Taylor here again, and I've got a bit of a confession to make because although I said last time I read the story about Tigger having his breakfast and discovering that he didn't like honey very much or acorns, he had just got to Kanga's cupboard. Now, Pooh had found some condensed milk and was very happy. Tigger, however, was doing other things. So here's a very short part and the final part of that chapter in which Tigger comes to breakfast. Pooh is sitting in a corner with a tin of condensed milk and gone off to make sure no one comes and disturbs him whilst he eats it, i.e. not sharing, which isn't very good. But Tigger is looking at a cupboard and inside a cupboard. The more Tigger put his nose into this and his paw into that, the more things he found which Tiggers didn't like. And when he found everything in the cupboard and couldn't eat any of it, he said to Kanga, "What happens now?" But Kanga and Christopher Robin and Piglet were all standing around Roo, watching him have his extract of malt. And Roo was saying, "Must I?" And Kanga was saying, "Now, Roo dear, you remember what you promised?" "What is it?" whispered Tigger to Piglet. "His strengthening medicine," said Piglet. "He hates it." So Tigger came closer, and he leant over the back of Roo's chair, and suddenly he put out his tongue and took one large gallop, and with a sudden jump of surprise, Kanga said, "Oh!" and then clutched at the spoon just as it was disappearing and pulled it safely back out of Tigger's mouth. But the extract of malt had gone. "Tigger, dear," said Kanga. "He's taken my medicine! He's taken my medicine! He's taken my medicine!" sang Roo happily, thinking it was a tremendous joke. Then Tigger looked up at the ceiling, closed his eyes, and his tongue went round his chops in case he'd left any outside, and a peaceful smile came over his face as he said, "So that's what Tigger's like." Which explains why he always lived at Kanga's house afterwards and had extracts of malt for breakfast, dinner and tea. And sometimes, when Kanga thought he wanted strengthening, he had a spoonful or two of Roo's breakfast after meals as medicine. "But I think," said Piglet to Pooh, "that he's been strengthened quite enough." And that's the end of that chapter. Now I'm going to go straight on and I'm going to read chapter 3, in which a search is organised and Piglet nearly meets the Heffalump again. I just need to confirm that this story was written by A A Milne and the illustrations are by the rather wonderful E.H. Shepard. Pooh was sitting in his house one day, counting his pots of honey, when there came a knock on the door. 14, said Pooh. "Come in." 14. Or was it 15? Bother, that's muddled me. There Pooh is, counting his pots of honey and getting muddled between 14 and 15. "Hello, Pooh," said Rabbit. "Hello, Rabbit. 14, wasn't it?" "What was?" "My pots of honey, what I was counting." 14, that's right." "Are you sure?" "No," said Rabbit. "Does it matter?" I just like to know," said Pooh humbly, "so as I can say to myself, I've got 14 pots of honey left, or 15, as the case may be. It's sort of comforting." "Well, let's call it 16, said Rabbit. "What I came to say was, have you seen Small anywhere about?" "I don't think so," said Pooh, and then, after thinking a little more, he said, "Who is Small?" "One of my friends and relations," said Rabbit carelessly. This didn't help Pooh much, because Rabbit had so many friends and relations, and of such different sorts and sizes, that he didn't know whether he ought to be looking for Small at the top of an oak tree or in the petal of a buttercup. "I haven't seen anybody today," said Pooh, "not so as to say 'Hello, Small' to." Did you want him for anything? I don't want him, said Rabbit, but it's always useful to know where a friend and relation is, whether you want him or whether you don't. Oh, I see, said Pooh. Is he lost? Well, said Rabbit, nobody's seen him for a long time, so I suppose he is. Anyhow, he went on importantly, I promised Christopher Robin I'd organise a search for him, so come on. Pooh said goodbye affectionately to his 14 pots of honey and hoped they were 15, and he and Rabbit went out into the forest. Now, said Rabbit, this is a search, and I've organised it. Done what to it? Said Pooh. Organised it, which means, well, it's what you do to a search when you don't all look in the same place at once. So I want you, Pooh, to search by the 6 pine trees first, and then work your way towards Owl's house, and look out for me there. Do you see? No, said Pooh. What? Well, then I'll see you at Owl's house in about an hour's time. Is Piglet organised too? We all are, said Rabbit, and off he went. As soon as Rabbit was out of sight, Pooh remembered that he'd forgotten to ask who Small was, and whether he was the sort of friend and relation who settled on one's nose, or the sort who got trodden on by mistake. And as it was too late now, he thought he'd begin the hunt by looking for Piglet and asking him what they were looking for before he looked for it. And it's no good looking at the 6 pine trees for Piglet, said Pooh to himself, because he's been organised in a special place of his own. So I shall have to look for the special place first. I wonder where it is. And he wrote it down in his head like this. Order of looking for things. Special place, number 1, to find Piglet. 2, Piglet, to find who Small is. 3, Small, to find Small. 4, Rabbit, to tell him I've found Small. 5, Small again, to tell him I've found Rabbit. Which makes it look like a bothering sort of day, thought Pooh as he stumped along. The next moment the day became very bothering indeed, because Pooh was so busy not looking where he was going that he stepped on a piece of forest which had been left out by mistake. And he only just had time to think to himself, I'm flying, what Owl does. I wonder how you stop, when he stopped. Bump. Ow! Squeaked something. That's funny, thought Pooh. I said ow, without really oohing. Help! Said a small high voice. That's me again, thought Pooh. I've had an accident and fallen down a well. My voice has gone all squeaky and works before I'm ready for it, because I've done something to myself inside. Bother. Help! Help! There you are. I say things when I'm not trying, so it must be a very bad accident. And then he thought that perhaps when he did try to say things, he wouldn't be able to, so to make sure he said very loudly, a very bad accident to Pooh Bear. Pooh! Squeaked the voice. It's Piglet, cried Pooh eagerly. Where are you? Underneath, said Piglet in an underneath sort of way. Underneath what? You, squeaked Piglet. Get up. Oh, said Pooh, and scrambled up as quickly as he could. Did I fall on you, Piglet? You fell on me, said Piglet, feeling himself all over. I didn't mean to, said Pooh sorrowfully. Have a look at these. There's one of Pooh falling into the bit of the forest that had been left out. Looks more like a hole to me. And then here's another one of Pooh sitting on Piglet. Can you see Piglet underneath him? And Pooh looking round to find out where the voice is coming from. Oh dear. I didn't mean to be underneath, said Piglet sadly, but I'm all right now, Pooh, and I am so glad it was you. What happened? Said Pooh. Where are we? I think we're in a sort of pit. I was walking along looking for somebody, and then suddenly I wasn't anymore, and just when I got up to see where I was, something fell on me, and it was you. Oh, so it was, said Pooh. Yes, said Piglet. Pooh, he went on nervously and came a little closer. Do you think we're in a trap? Pooh hadn't thought about it at all, but now he nodded, for suddenly he remembered how he and Piglet had once made a poo trap for Heffalumps, and he guessed what had happened. He and Piglet had fallen into a Heffalump trap for poos. That's what it was. What happens when the Heffalump comes? Asked Piglet, trembling when he'd heard the news. Perhaps he won't notice you, Piglet, said Pooh encouragingly, because you're a very small animal. But he'll notice you, Pooh. He'll notice me, and I shall notice him, said Pooh, thinking it out. We'll notice each other for a long time, and then he'll say, ho, ho. Piglet shivered a little at the thought of that ho, ho, and his ears began to twitch. I'm desperately trying to work out to find this picture of Piglet so that we can have a look at it, but there we go. Sadly, you can't see his ears twitching, but he does look a little worried, doesn't he? That might just be because Pooh's just got off him and he's a bit bruised and battered. What will you say? He asked. Pooh tried to think of something he would say, but the more he thought, the more he felt that there is no real answer to ho, ho, said by a Heffalump in the sort of voice this Heffalump was going to say it in. I shan't say anything, said Pooh at last. I shall just hum to myself, as if I was waiting for something. Then perhaps he'll say, ho, ho, again, suggested Piglet, anxiously. He will, said Pooh. Piglet's ears twitched so quickly that he had to lean them against the side of the trap to keep them quiet. He will say it again, said Pooh, and I shall go on humming, and that will upset him. Because when you say ho, ho, twice in a gloating sort of way, and the other person only hums, you suddenly find, just as you begin to say it the third time, well, you find, what? That it isn't, said Pooh. Isn't what? Pooh knew what he meant, but being a bear of very little brain, couldn't think of the words. Well, it just isn't, he said again. You mean it isn't ho-ho-ish any more? Said Piglet hopefully. Pooh looked at him admiringly and said that was just what he meant. And if you went on humming all the time, because you couldn't go on saying ho-ho forever. But he'll say something else, said Piglet. That's just it. He'll say, what's all this? And then I shall say, and this is a very good idea, Piglet, which I've just thought of, I shall say it's a trap for a Heffalump which I've made, and I'm waiting for the Heffalump to fall in, and then I shall go on humming. That will unsettle him. Pooh! Cried Piglet, and now it was his turn to be the admiring one. You've saved us. Have I? Said Pooh, not feeling quite sure. But Piglet was quite sure, and his mind ran on, and he saw Pooh and the Heffalump talking to each other, and he thought suddenly and a little sadly that it would have been rather nice if it had been Piglet and the Heffalump talking so grandly to each other, and not Pooh, because much as he loved Pooh, Piglet really had more brain than Pooh, and the conversation would go better if he and not Pooh were doing one side of it. And it would be comforting afterwards in the evenings to look back on the day when he answered a Heffalump back as bravely as if the Heffalump wasn't there. It seemed so easy now. He knew just what he would say. Heffalump gloatingly, ho, ho. Piglet carelessly, tra-la-la, tra-la-la. Heffalump surprised and not quite so sure of himself, ho, ho. Piglet more carelessly still, tiddle-um-tum, tiddle-um-tum. Heffalump beginning to say ho, ho, and turning it awkwardly into a what's all this? Piglet surprised. Hello! This is a trap I've made, and I'm waiting for a Heffalump to fall into it. Heffalump, greatly disappointed. Oh! After a long silence. Are you sure? Piglet. Yes. Heffalump. Oh! Nervously. I thought it was a trap I'd made to catch Piglet. Piglet, surprised. Oh, no. Heffalump. Oh! Apologetically. I must have got it wrong then. Piglet. I'm afraid so. Politely. I'm sorry. He goes on humming. Well, says the Heffalump. Well, I suppose I'd better be getting back. Piglet, looking up carelessly. Must you? Well, if you see Christopher Robin anywhere, you might tell him I want him. Heffalump, eager to please. Certainly, certainly. He hurries off. Pooh, who wasn't going to be there, but we find we can't do without him. Oh, Piglet, how brave and clever you are. Piglet, modestly. Not at all, Pooh. And then, when Christopher Robin comes, Pooh can tell him all about it. And that, my friends, is the end of part 1 of this chapter, which is called In which a search is organised and Piglet nearly meets the Heffalump again. Part 2 will come tomorrow.